Unit 4, Lesson 2, Earthquakes. What causes earthquakes? The outer layer of the Earth is divided into huge pieces that are constantly moving. When two of the pieces move against each other or move in opposite directions, an earthquake happens. A large movement causes a violent earthquake, and a small movement causes a mild one. There are thousands of earthquakes every year, but most of them are very small. The place where an earthquake begins is called the epicenter. When an earthquake happens, vibrations move outward from the epicenter. These rolling vibrations are called seismic waves. Usually, an earthquake is only strong enough to cause damage near its epicenter. When the epicenter of an earthquake is at the bottom of the ocean, it can create huge sea waves as tall as 15 meters. These waves cross the ocean in several hours. Rushing toward land, they destroy small islands and ships in their path. When they hit land, they flood coastal areas far from the epicenter of the earthquake. In 1868, a wave reached 4.5 kilometers inland in Peru. After an earthquake happens, people can die from lack of food, water, and medical supplies. The amount of destruction caused by an earthquake depends on where it happens, what time it happens, and how strong it is. It also depends on the types of buildings in the area, the soil conditions, and the size of the population. Of the thousands of earthquakes in the world each year, only about 1 in 500 causes damage. In 1556, an earthquake in northern China killed 830,000 people, the most in history. At that time, there was no way to measure its strength. In 1935, scientists started using the Richter scale to measure seismic waves. A seriously destructive earthquake measures 6.5 or higher on the Richter scale. How can scientists predict earthquakes? Earthquakes aren't just scattered anywhere on the surface of the Earth. They happen in areas where pieces of the Earth's surface meet. For example, earthquakes often occur on the west coasts of North and South America, around the Mediterranean Sea, and along the Pacific coast of Asia. One way to predict earthquakes is to look for changes in the Earth's surface, like a sudden drop in the water level in the ground. Some people say that animals can predict earthquakes. Before earthquakes, people have seen chickens sitting in trees, fish jumping out of the water, snakes leaving their holes, and other animals acting strangely. On February 4, 1975, scientists predicted an earthquake in northeastern China and told people in the earthquake zone to leave the cities. More than 1 million people moved into the surrounding countryside, into safe open fields away from buildings. That afternoon, the ground rolled and shook beneath the people's feet. In seconds, 90% of the buildings in the city of Haicheng were destroyed. The decision to tell people to leave the cities saved 10,000 lives. However, more than a year later, on July 28, 1976, the scientists weren't so lucky. East of Beijing, Chinese scientists were discussing a possible earthquake. During their meeting, the worst earthquake in modern times hit. Estimates of deaths ranged from 250,000 to 695,000. The earthquake measured 7.9 on the Richter scale. In late 1984, strong earthquakes began shaking the Nevada del Ruiz volcano in Colombia. On November 14, 1985, the volcano finally erupted. A nearby river became a sea of mud that buried 4 towns, and more than 2,100 people were killed. This combination of an earthquake and a volcanic eruption was not a unique event. In fact, it's not unusual for earthquakes and volcanic eruptions to happen at the same time. Mexico City has frequent earthquakes. An earthquake there on September 19, 1985, measured 8.1 on the Richter scale and killed 7,000 people. Most victims died when buildings fell on them. San Francisco, California also has frequent earthquakes. However, newer buildings there are built to be safe in earthquakes. When an earthquake measuring 7.1 on the Richter scale hit Northern California on October 17, 1989, only 67 people were killed. The earthquake hit in the afternoon when thousands of people were driving home from work. Freeways and bridges broke and fell. Buried under the layers of the Oakland freeway, people were crushed in their flattened cars. Explosions sounded like thunder as older buildings seemed to burst apart along with the freeways. As electric power lines were broken by the falling bridges and buildings, the sky, covered with huge clouds of black dust, appeared to be filled with lightning. Water from broken pipes rushed into the streets and mixed with gas from broken gas lines, causing more explosions. Emergency workers had to cope with medical problems. Everyone worked together to save survivors and comfort victims. The next day, the disaster sites looked terrible. Victims couldn't find their houses, their cars, or even their streets. Boats were destroyed and debris covered the surface of the sea. There was no water, no electricity, no telephone service, only the smell of garbage floating in melted ice in refrigerators open to the sun. Losses and property damage from the earthquake amounted to millions of dollars. Seismology is the study of earthquakes, and a seismologist is a scientist who observes earthquakes. Seismologists have given us valuable knowledge about earthquakes. Their equipment measures the smallest vibrations on the surface of the Earth. They're trying to find ways to use knowledge about earthquakes to save lives and help solve the world's energy shortage. The Earth's natural activity underground creates energy in the form of heat. Geothermal means earth heat. If seismologists could predict earthquakes, we could save about 20,000 human lives each year. Humans can control many things about nature, but they cannot control earthquakes.